Hi, we're Oxygen Conservation, and this is the Shoot Room Sessions. Peter, welcome to the Shoot Room Sessions.
Thank you very much.
Could you tell people out there who you are and what you do?
Certainly, my name is Peter Harker. I'm a partner with Saffery, and I've got the privilege of heading up our natural capital team.
Perfect. I'd like to know the Peter story. Can you take me back to where you were brought up, how your career started, and the route you've taken to being with us today?
Certainly, yeah. So going back to, I suppose, where I grew up and childhood, I born not far from you, near in Scunthorpe, on my passport, but then moved up to Northumberland, and that's where I sort of spent my earliest days. Lots of memories of walks along Hayden's Wall and sort of muddy puddles and cold winds, etc. But really sort of enjoyable time there. And then when we were 7, my father got a job, moved down to near Liverpool. He used to manage a land estate there, Knowsley Estate, and we were really lucky with that move, and moved into a lovely sort of cottage with a massive garden, which was just full of wildlife. And that was sort of where I sort of spent many a happy early childhood day. I then ended up taking a gap year, went to New Zealand before going to university to study geology. So at Durham there of doing geology.
What was the genesis for being able to go to New Zealand? Did you have family there? Did you know, like, what was the...
Yeah, so I suppose a few things. So New Zealand, my aunt and uncle had emigrated out there for years before, so I sort of had family connections out there. I absolutely love all things sort of adventurous sport, etc. So it seemed like a really good place to go. I managed to sort of land a few sort of, to call them jobs is maybe over-egging it, as sort of roles where I got free board and accommodation to hang out, and so I helped out at a rafting centre and a sea kayaking place were my two sort of highlights there.
Early warning, kayaking and all things related is going to be a
sure
thing.
It will, yeah.
Okay.
So I had that incredible year in New Zealand. It was wonderful.
Were you tempted not to come back?
There were moments, yes, yeah. It's amazing. I think it'll always feel like sort of my second home, if that makes sense. I've been back a few times since.
It's amazing how a place can grab you like that.
Yeah. So it's a really magical place. And my aunt's still out there, and so we've managed to go. I've been back 4 times since, 3 or 4 times since. So yeah, it's close to heart.
Nice. So as you returned?
Came back, did 3 years at Durham doing geology. Got to the end of that, didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Did you enjoy your time at Durham?
Absolutely loved it. It's a fantastic little sort of university town. There's another Durham person in the room.
No, best sister.
Okay, yeah. Wonderful place. And I did a lot more canoeing there. I was captain of the canoe club. So between studies, managed to fit in lots of adventures in the rivers of the northeast, which is absolutely fantastic. Got to the end of that.
Tell people what you love about rivers and kayaking, and what it's like. What do you experience when you do that?
So, for me, it's an absolutely fantastic sport. It encompasses, there's so many different disciplines of it, first of all, which I know you've done quite a few of them as well. You've got everything from the sort of relaxed, chilled sort of canoe touring or multi-day trips. I've done multi trips in Canada where you take all of your food and tent, etc., for a few days and camp going down the rivers. Done lots of white water paddling, which is a very different experience again, and there's a wonderful sense of exploring you can get some incredibly wild, remote places which you really can't access in any other way.
I didn't, up until you and I had a conversation about this a few months ago, I'd missed that part of my story with the environment. So I knew I loved kayaking. I always, would reference throwing myself off waterfalls as a kid and loving that. But I hadn't seen the obvious fact that gave me an opportunity to explore an adventure in places that people, sheep and deer couldn't get to.
Yeah.
So actually the arteries of the landscape, they're the wild parts that still remained.
Absolutely,
so I got to explore them and I just didn't know, like, it just hiding in plain sight in my memories.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I was reflecting on the way over here, actually, sort of how, sort of amongst sort of the more teachers and whatever, sort of canoeing was thought of as not a team sport, whereas actually it's when, especially when you do some white water, it's the absolute opposite. You've got to work as a really tight-knit team, trusting your friends to sort of set up safety for you and choose the lines you're going to pick down rapids, etc. And it's I've got some fantastic lifelong friends with that, because it's a really sort of bonding experience, and I've literally been fortunately all over the world with various kayaking adventures. So yeah, it's been great.
Amazing. So take us from Durham.
So then I did a master's in engineering geology at Newcastle. I love geology as a subject. Lots of field trips, being outdoors, sort of fitted with what I enjoyed and loved. And
for people who don't realise, the hydrogeomorphology, God, I haven't used that word in a while, the way rocks and sediments in river systems interact with water is what produces those playthings and structures and hydraulic waterfalls and jumps and leaps that we play in when kayaking.
Exactly,
so it's an obvious link for you that's like, it's the equivalent of someone who loves a skate park liking concrete engineering.
Absolutely, yeah. And I very nearly went down the hydrologist route. Actually, I did some work experience with a hydrology firm, and sort of didn't entirely discount that, but that sort of took me down the engineering geology route. So that was all about understanding the strength of rocks and soils and slopes to build big civil engineering projects, essentially. But it was halfway through that I had a bit of a wobble. There were quite a few people on my course who actually weren't enjoying their careers. They had a few years in industry and come back to do a qualification, and it made me sort of think, well, is there something else out there? And lots of my friends from my undergrad had gone into accountancy. If you'd asked me a year before that, I'd have said, I wasn't going to become an accountant, but I sort of had this change of heart, and they were all enjoying it, so I thought, I'll give this a go. And then I found myself applying for Saffery champness, as we were back then. One of the sort of specialisms of Saffery champness has always been landed estates, so acting for lots of large landowners. And having grown up in that sort of environment, it sort of felt like a really natural fit. It was a world I understood and could empathise with, and dinner time conversations were often around sort of the problems with the tenant farmer, or something that happened with the forestry, or something that happened, those sorts of things. So I just had that innate
you had all the colour and the context, lived experience of it.
Exactly, yeah. And my father would often take me on summer holidays. I would sort of go around various farm visits in his car, so I sort of had that experience of
even the language, actually, because I think about the sort of language of the rural sector, borrow pits, management, culls, like it's language that has unique meaning on those landscapes. So even being able to communicate in that way has got to be such a head start.
It is, yeah. I mean, I remember really early days, sort of one of my colleagues looking at some accounts for a estate saying, why on earth are they beating the grouse? And to explain that's not quite what they do, but yeah. But just having that sort of understanding of all of that, that language.
Good.
So yeah, that's sort of really stood me in good stead to work with. As I've been with the firm for just over 20 years now, which has been amazing. I think when we first spoke, I joked to you, said if you ever to invite me here, I'd be very boring. So I've only had one job, and many of you.
I beg to differ. But
the role has changed sort of in that 20 years and evolved. And
I think anyone having 20 years in a place now is so unique that in itself is interesting.
Yeah,
I think employment is. I mean, I said the line this morning over breakfast. It's rare that someone's going to be a one company person again, but at the moment, you're thriving in that setting.
Yeah, I mean, I've been incredible. I mean, Saffery have been an amazing firm to be with. Actually, on the way here, I took a call from somebody who's thinking of doing an internship with us, and they were sort of asking me, and I was explaining. I think it was in the first year I joined the firm, we were in the we won the top employer award, sort of accreditation for the first time, and ever since then we've had that award going forwards. It's just been, I've always said, it's been fantastic colleagues, really interesting clients, really interesting work, good progression. Why wouldn't I stay? And I've enjoyed it. So here I am. That sense.
Amazing. So talk to us about how working with large estates has changed from being a trainee accountant through now to your role. How has the sector changed? How have the conversations changed?
Yeah, at one level, a lot of the core conversations are the same. We have lots of different landowners. If I sort of focus on the sort of the traditional landed estates for the moment, they sort of fall into two camps: the ones that have been in families for many generations, and also the the new acquirers of estates. But the preservation of long-term wealth and land ownership is sort of key to what a lot of our advice to helping people with sort of succession planning, etc., to sort of structure things in a way that assets stay within the family. That is one of the overriding things, and that bit hasn't changed. The landscape and sort of what we've seen, it was about 15 years ago, we had the renewables sort of boom, if you like, the first sort of wave, and everybody was looking at those, and we got very heavily involved in that, and we still do quite a lot of renewable advice. And then sort of in your world, the natural capital sector, that's where it's become really exciting for me in the last few years. It was about 6 or 7 years ago, I went to an event where natural capital was sort of mentioned, and I sort of brought it back, and I sort of remember saying to colleagues, I think this is going to be really relevant to all of our landowning clients, because there are, I think, sort of big both opportunities, but also importance of understanding how they're managing their land and making sure they're doing it in the best way for them as a family, but also for the landscape and the environment, and make sort of maximising, get the sort of the right mix, if you like. And it just in the last 2-3 years, it's been really noticeable how it's gone from something which might not even been on the annual agenda to now it's up in the top sort of 2 or 3 items for most sort of annual trustee, director meetings, etc. They're looking at and want to understand what their natural capital opportunities are. So it's been, sort of shifted that dialogue, which has been great. Yeah.
So if we just touch on the renewable sector for a second, because people often talk about the emergence of that world and how it developed as being a forebearer for what natural capital might look like.
Yeah.
Did you see similar beginnings to those sets? When you saw renewables appearing, are you seeing the same green shoots, pun intended, in the natural capital sector?
Yes, I think it's dangerous to draw absolute parallels, but there are. Yes,
I worry about that too.
Yeah.
But where do you see them, and where do you think there are distinctions?
I suppose with the renewable sector, there was an immediate, obvious revenue source that was there. There were, if you generate electricity, there is already a real large scale marketplace for that. Whereas a lot of the natural capital ecosystem services, that is still being built out. There are things like BNG coming in, has created a good sort of government backed guaranteed scheme, and clearly the carbon credits, there are marketplaces there, but we're a lot more nascent. Whereas renewables was launched and people were buying electricity from coal power or gas or renewables, nuclear, but then renewables came along and that supply and demand was already there. They were just plugging it in from different angles. So that's why I think it's slightly dangerous to say it's similar in that sense, but
So you mentioned the emergence of natural capital and you hearing that initial conference. When you did come back and spoke to the firm, what were their views about? Was there an immediate recognition of, okay, this could be a thing, or was there skepticism, or how did it land initially?
Yeah, I think most people saw that there's going to be a future in this, the value. Everybody has their own sort of take on this, on the sector. There is a natural conservative approach, if you like, to a lot of dealing with landowners. It's not our place to tell them what to do with their land holdings, if you see what I mean. And I still sort of stand by that. It's not, we're not ecologists, etc. We're not there to preach what they should be doing with their land. It's their land and estates, and they should do what's right for them as a family. Where I see our role coming in is helping them, if they do want to do a natural capital scheme, making sure they understand what the accounting, tax implications, etc. are going to be, and making sure that it is going to be profitable going forwards. Because no point doing a scheme if it's, whatever it is, if it's going to have to be backpedaled or the land's going to be sold a few years down the line because the thing falls on its face. So it's a little bit twee, but one of my sort of phrases to explain to myself and to others what I see my role in the sector is to go, for landowners, go green, got to stay in the black. It's that, so it's got to make sense. For the finances got to add up.
I think we might have just found the title for your episode.
There you go.
Yeah. What don't we know at the moment? So in terms of, if you think about other investable classes, so with the renewables we mentioned, there already was a route to market, clearly.
Yeah.
What don't we know about natural capital? What are some of the infrastructure, the problems, the challenges we need to solve, the things that underpin it that just aren't there yet?
Well, there's who made huge advances in the last few years. There's lots of amazing business out there creating natural capital products to take to the marketplace and sell, and some starting to be really successful, which is really exciting to see. So that's fantastic. So as in my particular world, from the accounts and tax side of things, there's a lot of there's been a huge lack of clarity in treatment of inheritance tax, VAT, how things can be taxed for income, sort of accounting issues about revenue recognition. We've had some guidance from HMRC, and we've been working really sort of closely, sort of right wing sort of dialogue with them over a few sort of client cases over a few years, trying to tease out some of these answers. And some of those answers have now appeared in their guidance, which is lovely to see. As we're recording this, we've got the budget next week, so that the landscape might shift dramatically in terms of tax world. But one of the things which we are hoping for some clarity on is and it's been one of the big questions in the sector about the availability of agricultural property relief. I first wrote to HMRC about 5-6 years ago. We had a client that was looking at doing sort of a low-level rewilding type scheme, and we identified if they were taking it out of agricultural production, that landowner was going to lose the inheritance tax relief which they currently have on that land. And we wrote to HMRC saying this doesn't really feel right. In legislation, there are some old provisions when set aside, etc. So they had previously recognised that land didn't have to be used for agriculture purposes to qualify for APR, but under the sort of current schemes, that relief didn't sort of extend, and they confirmed back then that there was a problem. And so we've been sort of like banging the drum with HMRC, and other bodies such as CLA, etc., have been working hard as well. And so I was delighted in budget, was it March 2023, when they launched a consultation into this to look and understand. It wasn't just that question, there's a wider range of questions, but that was still one of the main parts, looking at the availability of agricultural property relief for ecosystem services, etc. And then when the budget came out in March, I was absolutely delighted when there's a proposal to extend APR to schemes under environmental schemes under not all of them were qualified, but many would. So that sort of felt like a big sort of personal win. I sort of felt I'd made a positive change. The hugely frustrating thing is with the early election, that didn't make the Finance Act, so we're still sort of in this horrible sort of grey zone of there's this suggestion that the Conservative government's put forward, basically, which who knows whether that will be carried forward.
Are you cited on whether that's being tested yet in terms of that scenario? Do we have any almost like case law version of?
Not as far as I'm aware. I think it's fairly black and white. It's a question of, is the land in primarily used for agricultural production, and if it is, it will qualify at the moment. If it's not, so there are certain BNG schemes, for instance, where there is a an argument that it's kept in agricultural production, so it may qualify. There is a mainly sort of test within the legislation. People often think, oh, if we're putting up solar panels, we can put sheep underneath it, and look, it's still used for agriculture, isn't it? There's some sheep there, and you've got to look at the main use of the land, and clearly in the sort of solar scheme, it's not for sheep, it's for solar, so you'd lose it in that context. So to answer your question, that we're not that unaware it's been tested yet, but what we would like to see is some positive change and clear guidance or change of legislation from HMRC to say, these schemes are now IHT friendly, and there's an awful lot of landowners who have been holding back doing environmental schemes because of that fear. When we wrote to HMRC in our response consultation, and we sort of did a sort of straw poll, and I think we came to something like 20,000 hectares of land that we could sort of very quickly say, yeah, that's not gone an environmental scheme because of this single fear. So it's quite a big issue. Yeah.
And we've made some progress this year on the VAT treatment of things that relate to carbon and nature-based products.
Yes. So that's been positive, and I've got colleagues that sort of work very closely, sort of VAT specialist colleagues that work very closely with HMRC on some of that. It's take us a long way forward. I won't go into all techie details. There are still some niggles there and sort of as all these things, sort of one answer breeds further questions, if you see what I mean. But it's been really good that HMRC being engaging positively and trying to improve the guidance there. There's still questions over how that extends to BNG or not. So we'll see, but that's been worked on, and
So other than clarification on the agricultural relief, what else would be on your wish list of improvements, iterations, development in thinking around the accountancy side of the environment that would really help things?
So probably one of the most asked accounting questions rather than tax questions is all around revenue recognition. It's exciting for us accountants, boring for other people, but it's really important when it comes to building out the business models and actually what do other financial statements of optional conservation, etc., going to look like when you selling these units. When can you recognise the revenue? And it's really different depending on whether you're selling carbon, BNG, other ecosystem services, how that revenue gets recognised in the accounts.
And even presumably within carbon, whether it's at PIU stage or a woodland carbon credit or a futures contract or whatever that might.
Exactly. And then we're seeing lots of different business models and sort of joint venture type arrangements sort of springing up, landscape recovery schemes, etc., where the answer is different depending on how that sort of structure's made up. So there's no sort of one size fits all answer. But what would be really helpful is to have some sort of HMRC blessed guidance on sort of generic, sort of base in simplest scenario. If you're selling BNG, this is how you should recognise revenue. And we worked really hard and to really sort of got under the skin of how BNG schemes work, for instance, and to understand it. So we've got a house view on all of these things. But it's fair to say there's a lot of confusion out there in the marketplace at the moment, and having that clarity would be good. One of the other things to come out of the consultation in March was HMRC setting up a working party, which we've been invited to join, and one of the products of that is they're hoping to produce these sorts of worked examples. So that would be again, that's, I think, so the change of government that's currently on ice, but we're hoping that'll get traction again, and that'd be hopefully a really good thing to be involved with if we can help bring that clarity to the marketplace.
You mentioned arriving at a house view. How does that happen? What's the process of getting to an agreed position on a new topic or area?
So it normally requires a real client to have a problem to look at, if you see what I mean. We haven't got the time sort of.
I did wonder that whether you've got a secret squirrel group just sat there thinking about interesting things at all points, as opposed to whether it was generated by a client question and ask.
90% of the time it's a client question. 10% of the time we see something coming down the track, sort of something. I think so with a lot of the work we've done around sort of carbon accounting. We've got lots of clients doing different carbon schemes, woodland carbon code, peat and carbon code, etc. So it's more been, we've found ourselves, we've got sort of very good knowledge sharing within our land estates team. Particularly, we get together once a quarter and sort of talk about what work we've been doing and share interesting cases. So to answer your question about how we can work house view, normally one or two people go away and bash heads together, write a sort of paper. We've then got a very good technical team that will sort of bounce that through, run it off. So it's not just a one person's view. We'll make sure that there's been a number of different eyes looking at it, because if we're putting our firm's name to it, we want to make sure that it's right. You've come to the past that all things in this sector are still new, and we are still there are things which could change, if you see what I mean. Legislation could change, whatever, but we've got to, in my view, it's much better to have looked at something, understood it as best you can, and put your best foot forward. If in the fullness of time that wasn't quite the right way of doing it, at least we've done it with a well thought out logical reason that we can sort of put our name to. So
and 80% of the work done in that scenario is still valid, valuable, and helps advance our thinking on it. So I think we have to hold strong opinions loosely.
Yes,
And I think that helps us move things forward.
Yeah.
Peter, you've once said that you think the accounting profession has a big role to play in addressing environmental issues, climate change, etc. Bring that to life for us.
So it's been a realization the last couple of years, and I think it's so I've done a bit of work with the ICAW, which is the Institute for Chartered Accountants, England and Wales, who is sort of our main institute for my qualification, ACA. And I've just sort of cycled off it, but for the last 5 years, so I've been on their farming and rural group. And that's sort of really sort of good knowledge sharing. Sort of, so outside Saffery's, lots of a dozen or so other accountancy firms all sort of meet up once a quarter and share knowledge there. So that's been a really good platform. And then through that, I've also got involved. They've got a really good initiative looking at supporting TNFD, which Task Force for Nature-related Financial Disclosures, and that I think is really exciting. And it is the effectively the international accounting standards and the sort of people setting those disclosure requirements for big corporates that I really think and hope will drive a lot more investment towards nature over the next few years, hopefully. TNFD was only published in sort of final draft form last September, so about just over a year ago, and it's not mandatory for any business in the world yet. But nevertheless, lots of businesses are early adopting it, seeing it coming. I think it's probably going to be mandatory in the EU, maybe in the next few years, and whether the UK will follow, yet to be seen. But actually, its very existence, a lot of the largest corporates want to be seen to be doing the very best practice when it comes to all things sort of ESG, and TNFD has provided that sort of gold standard when it comes to looking at reporting for both understanding a business's impact on nature, but actually, in a sense, more importantly for them, what their nature-based risks are, and to actually encourage those conversations to be had at sort of top boardroom level and documented in their annual accounts. As soon as you have to start being accountable for something, you're going to really sort of focus in on it and want to, if there are negatives in your business behavior, hopefully they're going to want to show how they are. I know offsetting could be sort of a slightly controversial word when it comes to nature, but demonstrating what they're doing in a positive sense. So that, I think, that aspect of accountancy is that's going to be really hugely influential.
One of the conversations we have occasionally is people who view any form of environmental or climate-based offset or compensation as being an easy, fast pass for a corporate to just behave badly. And I think, whilst that's perhaps true of a world whereby carbon credits are £1 or are incredibly cheap and low quality, no authenticity, no integrity where they're from, in a world whereby they're punitively expensive, so one of the private banks talked to us and described them as reassuringly expensive in terms of the value of them, I think people fundamentally misunderstand the fiduciary responsibilities of a board.
Yeah.
And I think they think corporate boards go, yeah, sure, sign off that check for X million. Can you help people understand the realities of how that conversation might go with a senior management team if you were asking them to sign a multi-million-pound check every year to offset an environmental compensation, for example?
Yeah, I mean, we're taking just carbon as the simplest sort of unit, most well understood, I suppose, by corporate boards at the moment. Already, and for a number of years, they've had to report on carbon footprint. A lot of our clients that we act for, large clients, have to have that in their annual accounts. And fundamentally, as you infer, businesses are going to want to make sure they're minimising their own scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, etc., before they look to actually offset. So you've got to reduce as much as you can of your own, and then offsetting should really be the bit that you really can't offset because of the nature of your business, because it requires travel, or the industry you're in produces carbon consumption.
We sometimes vilify that, but things like medical instruments and PPE, many of those require an element of petrochemicals to produce.
Yeah.
But we're not going to have a world whereby, and we shouldn't, where we haven't got sterile equipment that operating theatres can use, for example. But there is still an element of that might need to be compensated or offset in the future.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a matter of sort of getting your own house in order first of all, and then looking at what to offset going forwards.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
For anyone who's worked in, especially in a big corporate setting, getting anything signed off is incredibly challenging. I had a friend once who asked if he could order a book and was told to put in a business case. It was an £8 book. So the people who will say, "Oh no, they'll just pay £1 million to offset their cut," it's just not the way the world works.
No, it's one of the things which I there's huge fears, and lots of people I speak to about this sector. Sort of greenwashing comes up very, very quickly, and all the people I've interacted with who are operating at sort of head of environment or head of sustainability for some of the big corporates, which I've sort of met through ICAW, they're in charge of some pretty enormous budgets, and they are not going to want to write a check out for something which is not got value. See what I mean? So actually, where we are now in greenwashing, there is still a risk of greenwashing in the space, but I think the risk is a lot lower because, frankly, the people who are going to be paying for these things need and absolutely have to have the reassurance that whatever they're buying, be it carbon and some sort of nature credit or whatever, is of the highest quality.
Completely agree. So there's so much interesting stuff there. So on the greenwashing side of things, I think everyone should remain skeptical about any business's claims about environment and climate and things until they can be shown evidence, reality, truth. And in an AI world, that's increasingly harder. It's why we're as open as we are with the podcast and with the things we write and the way we approach business, because we want to share the reality of everything. Because a great example of this perhaps is you will never see a photograph or imagery from oxygen conservation that isn't of our portfolio that Josh hasn't taken. Because if I allow stock footage to appear, what else am I lying about?
Yeah.
So if we're not even presenting our own material, how can we be true about our intention for the environment, the way we communicate with people, the way we treat the landscape and things? And I think we all have to hold that really high position of integrity about what we do. And where we have to make compromises and travel, we need to out that, be honest about it, offset, compensate for it appropriately, make better choices and talk about those challenges and conflicts.
Yeah.
Where else have you seen that done well? Where have you seen people use transparency in their favor to help try and advance this cause?
I think in the wider natural capital sector, and we're really fortunate, and I suppose before I explain what we do, I was very much focused on the traditional landed estates, and that's been the genesis of my route to sort of do more in the natural capital sector. But now we're really fortunate we act for a number of businesses in this space, and one of the really encouraging thing I think is there is that sense of transparency which other sectors don't necessarily have, because I think people recognise that, as you sort of said, it would be building something sort of new, but equally wanting to make sure that everybody's understanding what the marketplace is about and having that transparency there. So I think, in a sense, almost all of the businesses I'm dealing with in the natural capital space are fantastically transparent in that sense.
I was asked once, don't you think it's unfair that the environment sector has been held to standards higher than every other business about transparency? I said, yep, and I think it's great.
Yeah.
Please hold everyone to those standards as well, and then we'd all be in a better spot.
Yeah.
So you mentioned working with some of those other natural capital sort of companies and businesses. You're doing some really exciting stuff about bringing together the next generation of people in this space. So you've hosted events and visits and got people together. Talk to us about why that's important for you as a business and personally.
So personally, it's I think I get a huge amount of job satisfaction for the fact that I'm able to do work in a space where I was reflecting on that sort of acting for landed estates as sort of my genesis, if you like. You've got to be quite a jack of all trades, so you can't just specialize in one particular area, because they're multifaceted, complicated businesses, complex families, etc. So I found myself in a place where I'm able to take all of my technical skills and apply it to this new evolving sector, but it's very relevant, and I've got a fantastic team around me that sort of back that up. So from a personal point of view, I'm really enjoying it, and to be able to bring people together in that space, I think it's so important to give people that opportunity to knowledge share and network, because we were saying that sort of openness and everybody building it, I think the sector is stronger if people have those relationships, share those ideas, have that sort of cross-pollination. There's already I've seen things come out of people I brought together where they've sort of gone off into sort of partnership together and doing things, and that's really fantastic, encouraging. I think that's that meeting which I helped created, stimulated something. From a business point of view, I mean, it's good business, isn't it? It's good marketing, it's good PR. To put it very, very bluntly, if you see what I mean, but it's also a very fun way of doing it. And I think people enjoy if you do things in a way that people enjoy. One thing, so which I'm not sure we've sort of touched on before, but my love of canoeing. And when we first spoke, it was one of those really serendipitous conversations where I'd already started planning a natural capital canoe trip, and within about 2 minutes, you sort of mentioned that you like canoeing. I thought, perfect.
Yeah.
So do you want to come on this canoe trip?
Well, and that led to, I met Ben Sharples at your event. Ben came on a podcast a few weeks later.
Fantastic.
So passing on and sharing of information and things that we can is super, super important.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk about new talent entering this space. What are you seeing in your sector of new talent that's coming?
We've got some fantastic kind of people in our sort of graduate scheme and newly qualified. And what I'm really trying to do internally is
steal them for the natural capital team.
So we'll build out the natural capital. So there's me and there's a group of us who we get together regularly. So my natural capital subgroup, as we call ourselves, we sort of sit under a wider structure. But one of the things I've really sort of realised in the last few months is actually I'm having to call on so many different people from different bits of the firm. We're looking at R&D, we're looking at EIS, we're looking at bits of employment tax could come into it, accounting. There's also so I'm having to pull in different specialists. And what I've realised, I need to do a lot more internal education, because although I'm all over the technicalities of the sector, I know the difference between a PIU and a WCU. Some of my colleagues don't. So I've been doing a lot to educate them. I took a team out to Nep Estate early in the summer as a bit of an educational sort of, just come and be absorbed in the natural capital world for an afternoon, get a feel and smell what it's all about. I've been doing internal education. You very kindly did a recording, which is now up on our internal intranet. As part of that, I've done other sorts of, I'm doing lunch and learn sessions internally. So trying to build up that team. There's a few sort of individuals in particular who are coming to me saying, this is really exciting, I want to do more of this. And it's been really nice to be able to sort of feed them with the real work for them to do as well. So it's nicely snowballing, which is lovely to see. And to your point, it's really nice to have something which gets people excited. People can see that they can do something with their day-to-day job, which isn't just about sort of wealth preservation, which has isn't a bad thing in its own right, but if they can do that and help contribute towards positive environmental goals, then that's fantastic.
How much does the environment and sustainability feature in the conversations with new entrants and when they're thinking about their career direction?
So I think it's as a business, we're seeing that the newer generations of people applying to either school leavers or graduates are care more than ever about the wider, we call it responsible business piece. So that comes from diversity, inclusion, equality, all of those sorts of things, but also through to environmental responsibility. So it's a big piece there which people care deeply about. As a firm, we do tend to attract people with an interest in rural estates. So other people, sort of farmers' sons and daughters, land agents, landowners, etc., do tend to sort of find a way to our team. So we do end up with a really sort of good group of people that do understand that sector as well, which is can be real positive.
Amazing. What are you most excited about for the future on a professional level?
I think that the natural capital sector has got huge potential to grow. There's a massive amount of institutional money that wants to get involved in this sector, and has been for a number of years, I think, trying to look and find its way in. And it's the way I describe it sometimes is our landowning clients own the keys to the kingdom, if you see what I mean. And it's finding the ways to join it up with basic payment scheme, etc., dropping away. Farming income, it's been a hard year or so for farmers. They had that very good couple of years, sort of with Ukraine and grain prices going up. Sort of the irony of something tragic going on that side of the world. Actually, our farming base had a fantastic year or two, but they're now, the numbers aren't looking very good this year, and it's, I think, in for a rocky time.
That irony you mention is something that I'm acutely aware of on a daily basis. So I spoke at an event a few weeks ago and happened upon a sort of phrase and terminology that, sadly, the worse the climate gets and the worse biodiversity is, the better that is for business from a natural capital perspective, which is awful.
Yes,
but it's important that we out those things as a reality, because it's a horrible burden to carry.
Yeah.
But a truism. That it just generate the need and demand more for us to find solutions to actually valuing, preserving, and improving the natural world.
Yeah. If we get to net zero by 2050, what's the price of carbon? It's probably not very much, because we've done it, if in that sense. So
that's an interesting point. So we're just in the process of redoing the Stockdale White curve for next year.
Yeah.
So we'll be coming to you with some views on this as well. And we're inverting the process this year, whereas last time Chris and I wrote a thought piece, sought feedback, adapted and amended.
Yeah.
This year, moving forward, we're going to send out an extensive survey first in terms of price discovery. So we've got a name of about 100 leading experts in the field we're going to go to, synthesize their views and perspectives and origins of information, and produce the next curve on that.
Okay.
And we're talking to some partners who will help us publish that. And our intent really is, hopefully this will be the last one we ever write, and somebody independently will take that on and run with it and work with it. And I think hopefully we'll get there close to it. But I think when we did last year's, we don't think we're going to solve this by 2050, but we didn't have the heart to put out a paper that said we wouldn't. So we built in a fix, we built in a, we will have solved this towards 2040 to 50. But right now, as I sit here, I hope we do, but I think the reality is it's probably going to be incredibly difficult.
We had a chap come in to speak to us about 18 months ago called Chris Stark, who was the head of the Commission for Climate Change. And they set all the 2050 targets, and he gave an amazing talk, which was, first part was terrifying, because he was sort of saying, even if we meet these, this is what the expected warming will be, and this are the impacts of it, and that's fairly dire. But what I found encouraging was when he was explaining under those plans how to get net zero by 2050, they aren't assuming that any new technology is invented that doesn't already exist. They're sort of saying, with what we've got, just by changing what we're doing, how we would get there. And interestingly, they're very realistic about what different sectors need to do in terms of decarbonisation. And they have this graph which showed kind of different industries and how they will be needed to sort of decarbonise. And the airline industry, unsurprisingly, it's a fairly shallow, they're quite realistic that that's not going to massively decarbonise. But the other shallow line which really sort of jumped out was agriculture, which I actually sort of felt was wrong. So I think there are huge potentials there, because it is by very nature a very carbon intensive industry. You need a lot of fuel to drive tractors and combines, etc. You're not going to change that. But equally, what I wasn't sure and didn't get a chance to ask is how much they are looking at the if you change to regenerative farming techniques, etc., you can really sort of flip your carbon sort of position as a farming business. So but it's a fascinating topic.
Completely agree. Yeah. And on a personal level, what are you most excited about the future?
There is working in the sector, I suppose, gives me a bit of hope, if that makes sense. There's lots of unpleasant, depressing headlines out there all too often these days, and I've got 2 young boys, and the sort of hope is that there's going to be, through all this work, a better place for them in the future, a better world. My wife works partly as a university lecturer, lecturing in geography, but still specialising in past climate change. But also she works 2 days a week as a forest school leader. So that sort of the importance of getting kids engaged with nature, I think, can't be understated, and that's something which I think is really important. And I was talking to opportunity to chat to Ben Goldsmith recently, and he said something which really stuck with it, which was if he could be one thing, it'd be Minister for Education, and his sort of remit would be to get children more engaged and understanding with nature. And our boys have grown up in welly boots from as soon as they could walk, if you see what I mean, and they absolutely love that. But it's what I'm excited about creating it sounds very grand, but helping create a better world, if that makes sense, having positive impact.
What a perfect way to conclude. Peter, thank you so much for coming into the shoot room. You're on a very, very short list of people who are helping build the systems, the processes, and the ways we're treating the financial side of this sector moving forward. I think there's been progress made in the last couple of years that wouldn't be possible without you, the team, and the wider business. So on behalf of all of us working in the sector, thank you. You're an absolute star. I really appreciate you coming into the shoot room.
Thank you, Rich. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.